She stood in the marble lobby, the badge cold against her dress. Housekeeper, it read in elegant script. Around her 300 guests turned to stare. Conversations died mid-sentence. Her husband's laugh cut through the silence, sharp and cruel. His mother's smile never wavered. At the family table, 7 chairs surrounded 8 place settings. The empty space where she should have sat glared like an accusation. No chair for her. No plate. Just a badge that turned 5 years of marriage and a military rank into a punchline. But what they didn't know, what none of them could see, was that she'd been planning for this exact moment for 6 months. And the plan was already in motion. I'm Keira, captain in the US Army's logistics branch and founder of Vanguard Solutions. Most people don't realize that my day starts with physical training at 5:30 in the morning, when the city is still dark and silent. By 6:15, I'm on a briefing call with my team going over the day's priorities. Before I even sit down to my own breakfast, I've already spent 2 hours managing crisis situations for 3 struggling veteran-owned businesses, analyzing their cash flow problems, renegotiating supplier contracts, teaching owners how to make their numbers work. My life is split between 2 worlds. Military precision on one side, business triage on the other. I'm proud of both. What I'm not proud of is how my husband's family treats me, how they've slowly, methodically tried to make me feel small over the past 5 years. Derek Ashford, my husband, is the kind of man who thinks moving money around makes him a builder, even though he's never built anything real in his life. He works as deputy director at Sterling Capital Group, a Chicago investment fund that specializes in glossy brochures, aggressive deal memos, and very little substance. The fund likes to talk about creating value, but mostly they extract it from companies they barely understand. His mother, Celeste, runs her social life like a small monarchy from her Gold Coast townhouse. Every dinner, every charity event, every casual gathering is choreographed with the precision of a military operation, but without any of the honor. She never lets me forget that she allowed me into the family, as if my marriage to her son was a privilege she granted rather than a choice Derek and I made together. His younger sister Vanessa is engaged to Marcus Halstead, a fintech CEO whose company Apex Flux is everywhere in the business pages but nowhere in actual banking circles. The company has impressive press releases and slick marketing, but when you dig into the numbers, the user data doesn't add up. The banking partnerships don't exist, and the whole operation smells like a house of cards waiting to collapse. When I met Derek 5 years ago, I'd just returned from my second deployment. I was leaner, quieter, more focused. I'd spent months coordinating supply chains in hostile territory, making sure soldiers got what they needed to stay alive. I'd learned that logistics isn't just about moving boxes from point A to point B. It's about seeing the whole picture, understanding dependencies, planning for every possible failure point. Derek loved telling people he was marrying an army officer. It made him look patriotic at fundraisers, gave him a compelling story to tell at cocktail parties. Celeste smiled for the photos, posed with me at engagement events. But when she thought I wasn't listening, she called me our little soldier, her voice dripping with condescension. Over time, the novelty wore off. My rank stopped being impressive and became a curiosity, then an inconvenience, then a joke. Instead of asking about my work, they'd ask if I could organize their closets or coordinate their staff schedules. My military service became a prop in their social theater, something they could trot out when it was convenient and ignore when it wasn't. I started Vanguard Solutions at my dining room table with a used laptop, a phone, and a list of veteran-owned restaurants that were about to go under. These were people who'd served their country, come home, tried to build something with their own hands and found themselves drowning in debt, bad contracts and financial systems designed to crush small operators. I'm good at cutting waste. I'm good at renegotiating contracts that vendors thought were locked in. I'm good at teaching owners how to read their own balance sheets, how to see the patterns in their cash flow, how to make decisions based on data instead of hope. In 3 years, I grew Vanguard into a $1 million firm with a small team of other veterans, each one bringing skills honed in service and adapted to civilian life. But to the Ashfords, it's still just my side project, something I do to keep myself busy while Derek does real work at Sterling Capital. At family dinners, Derek's colleagues ask him detailed questions about his deals, his strategies, his next big moves. When someone asks about my work, Celeste cuts in smoothly, redirecting the conversation. Keira keeps busy with her little consulting project, she'll say with a smile. She's very good with spreadsheets. The table always chuckles politely and the conversation moves on. 2 months ago, Vanessa's engagement invitations went out. Heavy cream cardstock, embossed lettering addressed to Chicago's social elite. The event was scheduled at the Grandview Hall, one of the city's most expensive venues. The kind of place that charges 5 figures just to walk in the door. 300 guests from the city's financial, political, and social circles. The goal, according to Celeste, was to show Marcus what real success looks like and to elevate Vanessa's social standing in preparation for the wedding. Derek asked me to dress understated so I wouldn't pull focus from his sister. He said it casually, like he was giving me helpful advice. But his tone carried an edge, as if I were the kind of person who would show up in sequins and diamonds to upstage the bride. I wasn't surprised by their attitude anymore. 5 years of marriage had taught me exactly who the Ashfords were. But a week before the party, something new landed on my desk that crossed a line I didn't know existed. One of Celeste's assistants sent over a draft of the seating chart and name badges for me to review. "Since you're so organized," the email said. The file included dozens of names, table assignments, dietary restrictions. And buried in the middle was a mock-up of my badge. In elegant script, the kind you'd order from an expensive print shop, it said, Housekeeper. Not Captain Keira, not Mrs. Derek Ashford, not even just Keira. Housekeeper. At first I thought it was a typo. Some administrative error made by a distracted assistant. Then I scrolled down and saw the internal notes attached to my name. No chair, no plate. Staff entrance. Maximum visibility. I read it 3 times, my breathing steady and controlled the way it gets when I'm back on the range, focusing on a target. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. They wanted to humiliate me in front of their guests, to reduce me to hired help at Vanessa's engagement party, to make sure everyone in Chicago's elite circles knew exactly where I stood in the Ashford family hierarchy. Celeste had once called my firm maid service for dying businesses. Apparently, she'd decided to make it literal. That night, Derek came home late, smelling of expensive whiskey and a perfume I'd noticed on his collar 2 Fridays in a row. The scent was distinctive, floral with a base note of amber. Not mine. While he showered, I sat in my home office. The door closed, the lights low, scanning through files I'd been quietly building for 6 months. Derek's expense reports from Sterling Capital. Fund statements showing investor money moving through accounts. Personal charges hidden in portfolio company budgets. Hotel stays billed as client development. Jewelry purchases disguised as retention bonuses. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. I'd photographed everything, encrypted it all, and backed it up to a secure server that even Derek's IT team couldn't access. I didn't want to believe I'd ever use this evidence. Marriage was supposed to mean loyalty, partnership, trust, even when one partner was careless or selfish. But marriage to Derek had turned into something else entirely. I pressed his shirts while he planned my public takedown. I organized his calendar while he met his mistress at the Palmer House. I smiled at his mother's dinner parties while she arranged my humiliation. I looked at the badge mock-up again, the elegant script mocking me. Housekeeper. The word should have stung. Instead, it felt like a trigger being pulled. A signal that it was time to stop playing defense and start executing the plan I'd been building. I thought about the soldiers I'd moved through war zones, the logistics operations where lives depended on precision and timing. Logistics isn't just moving boxes from one place to another. It's moving people out of danger. It's understanding that you don't wait for someone to save you. You plan your own exit, secure your own assets, and take your team with you. I wasn't just a wife anymore, sitting quietly while her husband's family played games. I was a commanding officer in a personal war I hadn't asked for but couldn't avoid. And I was done waiting for respect that would never come. Every morning before sunrise, I ran 5 miles through Chicago's quiet streets, my breath fogging in the cold air, my mind running through scenarios and contingencies. Back home, I'd review Vanguard's client files, send instructions to my team, then open a folder on my laptop labeled Operation Vanguard. Inside were timelines, evidence logs, financial documents, contingency plans organized with the same precision I'd used to coordinate supply convoys in hostile territory. James Fitzgerald, my IT specialist and fellow veteran, handled digital security. We'd served together in Afghanistan, shared a tent during a 3-month deployment where mortars fell close enough to shake the ground beneath our cots. He understood operational security, knew how to build systems that couldn't be compromised. Linda Prescott, a former JAG lawyer who'd prosecuted fraud cases for the military before transitioning to civilian practice, quietly reviewed the documents. She'd mark sections in red, cross-reference SEC filing requirements, build the legal framework we'd need when the time came. Neither of them asked questions they didn't need answers to. Veterans know how to follow a plan without grand speeches or emotional debates. You get the briefing, you understand your role, you execute. Derek thought I was busy with my little firm, spending my days helping failing restaurants and struggling shops. Celeste thought I was polishing silver for Vanessa's party, maybe arranging flowers or coordinating parking logistics. Vanessa thought I was just another prop in her carefully staged photo spread, background decoration in her perfect engagement story. They were all wrong. On the Thursday before the engagement party, Derek came home and tossed a cream-coloured invitation on the kitchen counter. It was addressed only to him, his name in calligraphy, no mention of me. Mom probably forgot to put your name on it, he said without looking up from his phone, his thumb scrolling through messages. Sarcasm dripped from his voice when he added, "You'll still be there, right?" I asked if I should RSVP for both of us. "Obviously," he said, his tone implying I was being difficult for even asking. "Just wear something understated. It's Vanessa's day." I nodded and went back to my office. The badge mock-up was still on my desk, printed out, sitting next to my military commendation certificates. Housekeeper. I picked up a pen and underneath it I wrote in black ink Captain Keira. Then I closed that folder and opened another one on my laptop, labelled simply SEC. The Securities and Exchange Commission whistleblower portal was already bookmarked, the submission form half filled with preliminary information. By the time Derek came upstairs to bed, I'd finished a revised operations plan and a detailed schedule for the next 72 hours. It wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was just logistics, assets, timing, execution. In the army, you learn that planning isn't glamorous or exciting. It's survival. It's the difference between making it through a mission and getting caught in an ambush. This wasn't about a dress code or a seating chart anymore. This was about dignity, about refusing to be erased, about making sure that when someone tries to humiliate you in front of 300 witnesses, they discover they've actually triggered their own destruction. I shut my laptop, turned off the light, and lay awake next to a man who had no idea that his carefully planned public spectacle was about to become his own undoing. Outside our bedroom window, Chicago's skyline glowed the way it always does. Towers of glass and steel reaching into the night sky. But for the first time since marrying into the Ashford family, I felt completely clear. I wasn't waiting for respect. I wasn't hoping they'd change. I was preparing for impact. The rest of the week moved like a drill, each day clicking into place with mechanical precision. Client calls for Vanguard's struggling businesses, evidence uploads to encrypted servers, coded text messages to Linda about SEC filing timelines, quiet conversations with James about digital security protocols. On Thursday evening, Derek breezed in with a shopping bag from an expensive boutique. He tossed it on our bed. "Wear this to the party," he said. Inside was a plain navy dress. Expensive fabric, designer label, but deliberately unremarkable. The kind of dress designed to blend into the background, to make the wearer invisible. I held it up to the light. "Very tasteful," I said. "Don't be sarcastic," he snapped. "Vanessa's big day is stressful enough without you causing problems." "Of course," I said quietly. He left for another meeting, phone already pressed to his ear. I hung the dress in my closet and shut the door. Late that night, after Derek had gone to sleep, I sat at my desk with the lights off, watching the city from my window. I drafted one more document, a simple checklist with 2 columns. What they planned badge-labeled housekeeper. No chair, no plate. Public humiliation in front of 300 guests. What I control, 6 months of financial evidence. Encrypted backups. SEC submission ready. Mortgage purchase documents for the Grandview Hall. Exit strategy. Timeline. Witnesses. I folded the paper carefully, slipped it into my bag, and shut down my laptop. There was nothing dramatic about it, nothing theatrical. Just logistics, the same way I'd coordinated supply convoys through hostile territory. Move supplies. Move people. Move yourself. Stay 3 steps ahead of the enemy. The morning of the engagement party, I drove to a quiet office space we'd rented under a generic LLC name. The building was unremarkable, the kind of place that handles accounting services and insurance claims. We'd chosen it specifically because no one would ever look twice at it. Inside, the blinds were drawn, the furniture plain and functional. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in timelines. Evidence logs, organizational charts. Linda Prescott was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, papers spread across the conference table in organized stacks. She looked like what she was, a former JAG officer who'd spent a decade prosecuting fraud cases before leaving military service. Sharp, focused, absolutely precise. "I've cross-checked everything," she said without preamble, pointing at a spreadsheet covering 3 pages of paper. "Celeste has 3 shell companies registered in Delaware, all feeding into an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands. Derek's been routing business development reimbursements through 2 of them, mixing personal expenses with investor funds. If we can show commingling of investor money with personal accounts, the SEC will freeze the assets first and ask questions later." I sat down, pulled out my laptop, and opened my encrypted folder. Thousands of files, each one labeled and cross-referenced. "What about Apex Flux?" I asked. Linda flipped to another tab in her spreadsheet. Inflated user data. False partnership claims with banks that don't actually exist. Marcus has been funneling investor cash into side ventures he controls personally. It's a classic pump-and-dump scheme disguised as fintech innovation. The moment SEC starts digging, the whole thing collapses. James Fitzgerald patched in on video, his face appearing on the monitor mounted to the wall. He was wearing a hoodie and had the same calm, focused expression I remembered from Afghanistan. The look he'd get right before we executed a high-stakes mission. "Your digital package is clean," he said. "Metadata scrubbed, timestamps verified, chain of custody documented. If you hit submit on that SEC portal, it's bulletproof. No one can claim tampering or fabrication." I nodded. "Good." Linda leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "You sure you're ready for this? Once we start, there's no going back. SEE will move within weeks. Sterling Capital's compliance team will panic. Apex Flux's board will call emergency meetings. Your name will be on the record as the whistleblower. Derek will know exactly who did this to him." "I know," I said. James added quietly, "and Celeste won't take it well." "I'm counting on that," I replied. We worked through the morning like an operations cell planning a military strike. Linda drafted the SEC complaint with attachments, organizing evidence into exhibits, cross-referencing regulations and precedents. I organized the financial exhibits, making sure every document was labeled correctly, every claim supported by multiple sources. James prepped the digital triggers, setting up automated submissions that would send evidence to financial journalists and regulatory agencies on a predetermined schedule. Each piece of the operation had a code name. Phase 1, evidence submission and controlled media leak. Phase 2, asset freeze and restriction of transfers. Phase 3, acquisition of the Grandview Hall through a shell company tied to Vanguard Solutions. Phase 4, public announcement of the Hall's new mission as a veteran community center. By noon, we'd built a plan that would make any battalion operations officer proud. The kind of plan where every contingency has a backup. Every action triggers 3 more. Every piece moves in sequence toward a single objective. Linda slid a final page across the table. "This is the trigger schedule," she said. "Once you initiate, you can't pause it. CC will move within 48 to 72 hours. Sterling Capital's compliance team will receive notification. Apex Flux's investors will get anonymous tips. Media outlets will receive embargoed documents. Derek will be suspended within a week. Celeste's offshore accounts will be frozen within 2 weeks. You'll be exposed as the source within a month." "I understand," I said. "You'll be on the record," Linda emphasized. "Your name in legal filings. Your face possibly in the news. Derek and Celeste will know you destroyed them." "Good," I said simply. James spoke from the monitor. "And they'll come after you legally, socially, every way they can." "Let them try," I said. "By the time they realize what happened, I'll own the Grandview Hall, I'll have federal protection as a whistleblower, and they'll be too busy dealing with criminal investigations to focus on revenge." We paused for lunch. Black coffee for me, a turkey sandwich for Linda, nothing for James except bottled water. It felt like deployment briefings I'd attended in forward operating bases. That same focused energy where everyone understands the stakes and no one wastes words on doubt or sentiment. When we finished, Linda closed her laptop and looked at me directly. "I'll handle the legal side. You handle your cover. Act normal. No dramatic exits, no hints, no warning signs. Let them underestimate you right up until the moment they can't stop you anymore. I almost smiled. That's my specialty. Driving back into the city, I passed the Grandview Hall. From the street, the building looked beautiful. White columns, manicured hedges, banners advertising Chicago's premier event destination fluttering in the breeze. The kind of place that photographs perfectly for social media posts and society pages. But up close, if you knew what to look for, you could see the cracks in the facade. Literally. Cracks in the stucco, weeds growing through the planters. Scaffolding still up on the rooftop lounge Vanessa had been bragging about. The mortgage filings I had stored in my car's glove compartment told the real story: debt, liens, and an owner desperate for cash. I parked a block away and walked the perimeter like I was inspecting a supply depot before a mission. The security cameras pointed outward, covering the main entrances. But they left blind spots near the service entrance where deliveries came in. Staff entered through a narrow alley where no one important ever went, where no one paid attention. Good to know. I wasn't planning anything theatrical for tonight, but I like to understand my terrain, to know my exits, to see the full tactical picture. Back at home, Derek was in his study on a speakerphone call. I could hear him through the door. "No, move it to the Cayman account," he was saying. "No paper trail. Make sure it clears before Monday." He didn't even lower his voice. He had no idea I was documenting everything, that his carelessness was the foundation of his own destruction. I walked past the door silently and went to the kitchen. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Draft ready. Just say when." I typed back, "Stand by." Then I made a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen counter with a yellow legal pad. At the top, I wrote Operation Vanguard pre-execution checklist. Underneath, line by line, I listed tasks: final evidence review, secure witness statements, confirm pavilion mortgage purchase, prep Vanguard press release, notify Federal Protection Program, update encrypted backups. Derek wandered in, loosening his tie, his face flushed from whatever he'd been drinking. "You're quiet," he said, reaching into the refrigerator. "Just tired," I replied. He pulled out sparkling water and smirked. "Mom says you're handling the staff logistics for the party." "Good. Don't mess it up." "I won't." He leaned against the counter, studying me with the casual contempt of someone who'd stopped seeing his wife as a person years ago. "Try not to look too military tomorrow night. It's a social event, not a briefing. Relax. Blend in." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. The less I said, the more comfortable he felt, the more he underestimated me. That night, after Derek went to sleep, I sat at my desk in the dark. The only light came from my computer monitor, casting a pale glow across the room. I opened the SEC whistleblower portal Linda had bookmarked. The cursor blinked in the attachment upload box. One click, and 6 months of evidence would be in federal hands. Not yet. Timing mattered. The engagement party was my landing zone, the moment of maximum visibility. I wanted Derek and Celeste to see me humiliated with their own eyes before they discovered what was coming. I wanted them to feel victorious right before everything collapsed. I closed the browser window and pulled out the badge mock-up from my drawer. Housekeeper. The word no longer made me angry. It made me focused. It made me certain. I clipped it to my corkboard next to my army ribbons. My commendation medals, my unit insignia. Side by side, they looked like a before and after photo of a life. One identity earned through service and sacrifice. The other assigned through contempt and cruelty. Together, they told the whole story. The next morning, I woke before dawn, showered, and dressed in running clothes. The city was dark and quiet as I logged my 5 miles, my breath fogging in the cold November air. Each footfall steady, rhythmic, meditative. By the time I got back to the townhouse, my mind was completely clear. I made breakfast, reviewed Vanguard's client files, sent instructions to my team. Normal routine. Nothing dramatic. Then I opened my encrypted drive one more time, scanning through the evidence, making sure everything was organized and accessible. At noon, Linda called. "Everything's set on my end. Say the word and we execute." "Tonight," I said. "After I leave the party." "Copy," she replied, using military terminology without thinking. Old habits from her JAG days. I hung up and looked at the dress hanging in my closet. Plain navy, expensive, designed to make me invisible. I laid it out on the bed next to simple black heels, minimal jewelry, the kind of outfit that says I'm not here to compete. I'm not here to shine. I'm here to serve. Perfect camouflage. In my purse, I packed the essentials wallet, keys, phone, and a slim flash drive disguised as a lipstick tube. Inside that flash drive was a mirrored backup of everything. Financial records, screenshots, audio recordings, security footage, signed affidavits from vendors Derek and Celeste had stiffed over the years. If my phone was seized, if my laptop was confiscated, if everything went wrong, that flash drive alone contained enough evidence to destroy Sterling Capital and Apex Flux. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, fastening simple pearl earrings. The woman looking back at me was calm, composed, unremarkable. Nothing in my expression hinted at what was about to happen. My face was camouflaged, just like the dress, hiding my true intentions behind a mask of compliance. Years of uniform inspections had trained me to check every detail before stepping into a mission. Hair smooth. Makeup minimal. Expression neutral. Nothing to draw attention or raise suspicion. On the desk behind me, my phone buzzed once. James' secure link active. All systems green. Standing by. I picked up the housekeeper badge mock-up and slipped it into my purse next to the flash drive. A reminder of why I was doing this. Proof of their cruelty. Evidence that would matter when everything came to light. The drive to the Grandview Hall took 20 minutes through early evening traffic. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful, indifferent, unchanged by whatever small human dramas played out beneath it. The chill hit my face as I stepped out of the car at the Grandview Hall's entrance. The early November air was crisp enough to sting but not cold enough to show breath. The valet took my keys without making eye contact, handed me a ticket, moved on to the next car in line. Around me, luxury vehicles slid up to the entrance in a steady stream. Bentleys, Teslas, a vintage Rolls-Royce with a custom plate that screamed old money. Men in tailored tuxedos. Women in designer gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of crowd that measures worth in zeros and connections. The building's white columns glowed under soft spotlights. Banners proclaiming Chicago's premier event destination fluttered slightly in the breeze. Everything choreographed for maximum elegance, maximum impact. Inside the lobby, the air smelled of polished marble and expensive perfume. A string quartet played near the marble staircase, the notes floating over the low hum of conversation and the sharp click of heels on stone. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over clusters of Chicago's financial elite. I walked past groups of Derek's colleagues from Sterling Capital, all in tailored suits, drinks already in hand. Their voices dropped as I passed, not out of respect, but curiosity. I could feel their eyes tracking me, could almost hear their thoughts. "That's her," one man said, just loud enough to be heard. "The one who runs that little veteran business or whatever. Derek's charity case." Another man chuckled softly. "Heard Celeste has her organizing staff tonight. Fitting." I kept my stride steady, my heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of a metronome. Years of marching on uneven terrain in combat boots had taught me balance and control. Walking in stilettos on polished marble seemed trivial by comparison. At the check-in desk, a young woman in pearls and a black dress stood behind a table covered with name badges arranged in alphabetical order. She looked up with a bright, professional smile. "Name?" she asked. "Keira," I said clearly. Her smile faltered. She flipped through the badges once, then again. Then a third time slower, her movements becoming more uncertain. Pink crept up her neck as she realized something was wrong. She ducked under the table and came up holding a single badge that had been separated from the rest. Set aside, kept away from the regular guests. She handed it to me without meeting my eyes, her hand trembling slightly. I took it and looked down. In elegant script, the kind you'd pay a premium for from a specialty print shop, it said Keira, Housekeeper. The badge felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of every slight, every dismissive comment, every condescending smile I'd endured over 5 years. I held it in my hand, feeling the smooth edges, reading the words that were designed to humiliate me. A champagne-colored Chanel suit appeared at my side. I smelled Celeste's signature perfume, expensive and cloying, arriving a split second before her voice. "Oh, Keira," she said, her tone warm and gracious, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear clearly. "Thank you so much for helping tonight. The staff entrance is around back, dear. Much more convenient for you." The lobby went silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Hedge fund managers turned away from the bar. Whiskey glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Society wives paused mid-laugh, mouths still open. A federal judge's wife gasped softly. Everyone staring, watching, waiting to see how I'd react. I clipped the badge to my dress with hands that didn't shake. My fingers were steady, controlled, precise. "This works fine," I said evenly, my voice carrying across the marble lobby. Celeste tilted her head, the picture of practiced sympathy. She reached out as if to guide me toward the service entrance, her hand hovering near my elbow. "Try not to stand too close to the head table, dear," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. "It confuses the servers when they're trying to work. You understand." I stepped past her without replying, walking directly into the ballroom. Behind me, I could hear the whispers starting, voices layering over each other. "Did you see that? Celeste actually put her in a staff badge? I heard she was military. Apparently not military enough for a real seat." The ballroom was stunning, precisely as expensive as Celeste had promised. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids everywhere, round tables draped in silk. At the front of the room, a small stage held a string quartet and a podium for speeches. Everything perfect, everything polished, everything designed to impress. Table 3 sat near the front, close enough to the head table to be considered part of the family section. It was arranged with surgical precision. 7 chairs surrounded 8 place settings. The empty space where I should have been sitting glared like a spotlight, impossible to miss. Even the floral centerpiece had been shifted slightly to draw attention to the gap. The other guests at the table were already seated. Derek's business partners and their wives, all dressed in designer labels, all holding champagne flutes. They looked at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to barely concealed amusement. "Isn't that the one who saved Whitmore Logistics?" One woman whispered to her husband, not quite quietly enough. "Apparently she's staff now," he replied, his voice carrying. "Take a picture." I stood beside the empty space, my hands folded calmly in front of me, and read the room the way I'd read battlefields. Tactical assessment, threat analysis, understanding the terrain. Celeste's friends watched from nearby tables, their eyes bright with satisfaction. They'd been part of the planning, I realized. They knew this was coming. This humiliation was entertainment for them, a story they'd tell at future parties. The mayor's wife, seated 2 tables over, actually gasped and put her hand over her mouth when she saw the badge. A federal judge's husband pulled out his phone and started texting someone, probably sharing the gossip in real time. I kept my expression neutral, my posture military straight, my breathing controlled. Everything they saw was camouflage. Inside, I was counting down. 3 hours until I left. 2 hours until the evidence hit SEC servers. 48 hours until their world started collapsing. Derek arrived 40 minutes late, strolling in without apology. His jacket was off, his tie loosened, his face flushed from pre-party drinks somewhere else. The smell of Chanel, no. 5 clung to him like evidence. The same scent I'd noticed on his collar for months. Lipstick traces at his collar, coral-coloured, the exact shade his assistant Rebecca wore to every company event. He saw me standing there, saw the badge clipped to my dress, saw his mother's satisfied smile from across the room, saw his business partners watching, waiting to see how he'd react. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh, a genuine, amused laugh. The kind of laugh that said this was funny to him, that his wife standing without a chair while wearing a housekeeper badge was entertainment. "Relax, Keira," he said, sliding into his assigned chair, picking up his champagne flute. "Food is for family." The words landed like a physical blow, but I didn't react. I stood there, hands still folded, face still calm. 5 years of marriage. 3 years of saving veteran-owned businesses. 18 months ago, I'd saved his father's manufacturing company from bankruptcy, restructuring their entire supply chain, negotiating with creditors, finding buyers for excess inventory. And I wasn't family enough for a chair. Wasn't family enough for a plate. Wasn't family enough to sit. The clarity that hit me wasn't slow. It was instantaneous, like a circuit completing. I'd known for months that this marriage was over, that Derek was cheating, that his family despised me. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your bones are different things. This was the moment. This was the trigger point. This was when pretending ended and action began. I reached for my left hand where my wedding ring had sat for 5 years. 2 carats, flawless cut, set in platinum. Derek had chosen it himself, not for me, but to impress his business partners. Something expensive enough to photograph well at charity events. The ring was warm from my skin, familiar from never taking it off except for physical training. I pulled it off slowly, deliberately, letting the overhead chandelier lights catch each facet of the diamond. The stone threw tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. Conversation at nearby tables stopped. Someone set down a fork mid-bite, the silver clinking against china. A woman in a red dress leaned forward, her mouth open in shock. I placed the ring on the white tablecloth with precision, setting it down carefully in the center of my empty place setting. The soft click as it touched the fabric echoed louder than it should have, carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "Then I'm no longer yours," I said, my voice clear and carrying, trained by years of giving orders in combat zones. Derek's laugh died in his throat. His face flickered through emotions too fast to track individually. Confusion, embarrassment, anger, realization. His hand froze halfway to his champagne glass. Around the ballroom, 300 guests turned to stare. The string quartet faltered mid-note, then stopped playing entirely. Waiters paused in mid-service, holding trays above their heads. Celeste's voice cut across the silence, sharp and commanding. "Derek, do something!" But Derek just sat there, his face draining of colour, finally understanding that this wasn't theatre, that his wife hadn't just made a dramatic gesture for attention. The woman he'd labelled the housekeeper had just quit her position in front of Chicago's entire financial elite. I turned and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against marble with perfect rhythm. Each step measured, controlled, deliberate, not running, not rushing, just walking with the same steady pace I'd use leaving any other building. Behind me, chairs scraped against the floor. Voices rose in a wave of sound. Did that just happen? She left her ring. Where's she going? Someone stop her. Did you record that? Marjorie's voice, shrill and panicked. Security, don't let her leave. But the security guards at the doors just looked at each other, uncertain. I wasn't causing a scene. I wasn't breaking anything. I was just a woman walking calmly toward the exit. What were they supposed to do? Tackle a military officer in front of witnesses? I kept walking. Didn't turn around. Didn't acknowledge the chaos erupting behind me. 300 people would remember this night, would tell the story at other parties for months. The night Derek Ashford's wife stood without a chair, then walked away from her marriage in the middle of his sister's engagement party. In the foyer, a young waiter stood frozen mid-step, holding a tray of champagne flutes. His eyes were wide with shock. I took one glass without breaking stride, took a sip of the cold champagne and handed him back the housekeeper badge. "You might need this more than I do," I said quietly. He took it with trembling fingers, still staring at me like I was something he couldn't quite process. I walked out under the same white columns and banners that had greeted me an hour earlier. Outside, the night air felt colder than before, but cleaner, sharper. My lungs expanded fully for the first time in hours. My car waited at the curb where the valet had parked it. He hurried over with my keys, his face carefully neutral, though his eyes showed he'd heard the commotion from inside. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, handing me the keys. "Have a pleasant night." "Thank you," I said. "I will." I slid behind the wheel, started the engine and pulled away from the Grandview Hall. In my rearview mirror, I could see guests crowding at the windows, pointing, their faces illuminated by the warm light from inside. Let them watch. Let them wonder. By morning, they'd have much more to talk about than a missing wife. My hands on the steering wheel were steady, steadier than they'd been in months of pretending everything was fine. The badge sat in my purse like evidence. I reached over, slipped it into the glove compartment next to mortgage documents for the Grandview Hall, and pulled out my phone. I merged into traffic heading toward Lincoln Park and called James. He answered on the third ring. "Go," he said. "No greeting necessary. Execute Operation Vanguard," I said clearly. There was a brief pause, the sound of keys clicking in the background. Then his voice came back, clear and professional. "Confirming execution of Operation Vanguard. Asset freeze protocols initiating now. Document preservation complete. CC filing prepared for submission. Media packages queued for delivery. All systems green." "Copy," I said and hung up. At a red light, my phone buzzed. "Linda submission confirmed. SEC timestamp 2047. You're officially a whistleblower. Federal protection protocols activated. Are you clear?" I texted back clear, proceeding to safe house. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, feeling the car surge forward smoothly. This wasn't escape. It was movement, controlled, deliberate, and entirely mine. I drove through quiet residential streets past houses glowing with normal Saturday night warmth. Through windows, I could see families eating dinner, couples watching television, teenagers doing homework. Normal life continuing unchanged. No public humiliation, no housekeeper badges, no missing chairs. The contrast felt surreal, like I'd stepped out of one reality and into another. At home, the townhouse was dark. Derek wouldn't be back for hours. Maybe not at all. He'd stay at the party, trying to salvage his reputation, explaining to 300 guests why his wife had just walked out on their marriage in the most public way possible. I poured myself exactly one glass of red wine, set it on the counter and opened my laptop. The SEC portal glowed on the screen. The upload confirmation displayed in neat blue text, submission complete. Timestamp 204733, case number WB 2024-7843. I clicked through to the mirrored folder James maintained on secure servers. Each file labelled, each exhibit cross-referenced, each piece of evidence organised with military precision. Hartford equity misallocation. Apex Flux fraudulent metrics. Celeste's offshore accounts. Marcus's side ventures. Derek's expense fraud. Years of their arrogance, their cruelty, their casual corruption, all compressed into gigabytes of data. I closed the laptop gently and took a sip of wine. The taste was sharp, complex, nothing sweet about it. I set the glass down and looked at the corkboard in my home office where my army ribbons hung. Beside them, an empty pushpin waited. Tomorrow, the housekeeper badge would go there. Not as a wound, but as evidence. Proof of what happened. Reminder of why this was necessary. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. No dramatics, no speeches, no theatrical gestures. Just an officer executing a plan that had been months in preparation. I picked up my phone and opened the news alerts. Nothing yet. It was too soon. But by morning, financial journalists would have anonymous tips. By Monday, SEC investigators would be knocking on Sterling Capital's doors. By next week, this would be the biggest financial scandal in Chicago's recent history. I sat in the quiet darkness of my office, sipping wine and felt nothing dramatic, no triumph, no revenge satisfaction. Just the calm clarity of a mission executed correctly. Outside, the city continued. Traffic hummed on Lakeshore Drive. Planes descended toward O'Hare. Somewhere, Derek was probably calling his lawyer or his mother or both, trying to understand what had just happened. Let them scramble. Let them panic. By the time they figured out what I'd done, it would be far too late to stop it. I finished my wine, washed the glass, and went upstairs to pack. Federal protection protocols meant I'd need to relocate temporarily. James had already arranged a secure apartment in a different neighborhood, registered under a corporate entity that couldn't be traced back to me. I packed efficiently, the way you pack for deployment essentials only, everything organized, nothing wasted. Clothes, toiletries, laptop, backup drives, documents. Within 30 minutes, 2 suitcases sat by the door. Before I left, I walked through the townhouse one last time. The kitchen where I'd pressed Derek's shirts. The dining room where Celeste had made countless condescending comments. The living room where I'd smiled through family gatherings while they treated me like hired help. It had never been my home. It had been a stage where I played a role for 5 years. Now the performance was over. I loaded my suitcases into the car and drove toward the safe house. My phone continued buzzing with calls and texts. Derek, Celeste. Unknown numbers, probably journalists who'd somehow gotten my contact information. I ignored them all. By the time I reached the safe house, a modest apartment in a building with good security, it was past midnight. I carried my suitcases inside, locked the door, and stood in the empty living room. For the first time in 5 years, I was completely alone. No husband, no in-laws, no expectations. Just me and the consequences of my choices. I slept deeply that night, better than I had in months. I woke before dawn, still dressed from the night before, my phone buzzing steadily on the nightstand. I'd silenced it but not turned it off. And now alerts lit up the screen in rapid succession. James had sent a string of updates, each one short and factual like a situation report. CC acknowledgement received. Sterling Capital internal alert triggered. Apex Flux flagged for review. All critical accounts frozen by 3:17 a.m. Media beginning coverage. I scrolled through them without emotion, reading them like coordinates on a map. Each message was a checkpoint on the route we'd drawn months ago, each one confirming that the plan was unfolding exactly as designed. The coffee maker in the safe house kitchen was new, unused. I figured out how to work it and made a pot. The familiar smell of roasted beans helping to ground me in this unfamiliar space. Normal routines in abnormal circumstances. The muscle memory of deployment coming back. That ability to adapt quickly to new surroundings while maintaining personal rituals that keep you centered. At 7:15 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was a link from James with just 2 words, "Open this." It was security camera footage from Sterling Capital's headquarters. The video showed Derek in his glass-walled office, sleeves already rolled up even though it wasn't yet 8 in the morning. He was staring at his computer screen, reading something. His face shifted from confusion to panic to rage in less than a minute, the emotions playing across his features with perfect clarity. Then he picked up his laptop and hurled it against the wall. The screen shattered, pieces flying. He shouted something at his assistant, who backed away with her hands up. Other employees appeared in the hallway outside his office, drawn by the noise. The video continued. 3 junior analysts stood in the hallway, phones out, recording the meltdown from a safe distance. Their faces showed shock and something else, satisfaction. Derek had made plenty of enemies on his way up the ladder. James's note underneath the video said already trending. Whitmore meltdown. I closed the video and poured more coffee. The smell of roasted beans mixed with the quiet of the unfamiliar apartment. My mind didn't linger on Derek's outburst. It had already shifted to next steps, to contingencies, to the carefully planned sequence of events that would unfold over the coming days. Linda called at 8 sharp, her voice crisp and professional. "We're green across the board," she said without preamble. "CC has acknowledged your submission and issued preliminary freeze orders on all accounts you flagged. Sterling Capital's compliance team is scrambling. They've brought in outside counsel. Apex Flux's board scheduled an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Celeste's wire transfers have been flagged and blocked. She's going to find out soon if she hasn't already." "Good," I said simply. "You should also know," Linda continued, "the limited partners at Sterling Capital are furious. They're leaking information to the press to distance themselves from Derek. They're claiming they had no knowledge of the fraud. Expect major coverage by tonight. The Chicago Tribune already has reporters digging." "I'll be ready," I said. "How are you doing?" she asked, her tone softening slightly. "Focused," I replied. "This is just the beginning." We hung up. I opened my laptop and logged into my email. The inbox was flooded. Messages from contacts in the veteran business community. Clients asking if I was okay, colleagues forwarding screenshots of the meltdown video, old army friends checking in. I ignored them all for now. Instead, I opened a new email and addressed it to 3 CEOs whose companies Vanguard had saved through contracts arranged via Sterling Capital. Subject line: documentation of fund misallocation, urgent board review recommended. I attached the relevant exhibits, financial documents showing how Derek had charged personal expenses to their operational budgets, hotel stays billed as client development that were actually romantic getaways with his mistress, jewelry purchases disguised as retention bonuses, consulting fees paid to shell companies that did no actual work. Each document was authenticated, notarized, cross-referenced. Impossible to dispute. I hit send. The phone rang 5 minutes later. Michael Chin from Pinnacle Tech, one of the companies we'd saved. "Keira," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "These documents, are they real?" "Every receipt is authenticated," I said. "The hotel stays you saw in Q3 were for Derek and Rebecca, not your staff. Check your own ledgers. You'll see the transfers." Michael swore under his breath, a long string of profanity that would have made a drill sergeant proud. "Our board meets in an hour. This is going to explode. We have fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. If Sterling Capital has been committing fraud using our funds, handle it internally," I said. "I won't be commenting publicly. But you needed to know." "Thank you," he said quietly. "And Keira, I'm sorry for what they did to you. Everyone in the veteran community has heard about the engagement party. That badge. It was unconscionable." "Yes," I said. "It was." By 10 o'clock, Linda texted again. "Celeste just got served by ex-husband's attorney. Cayman accounts exposed. She's furious. Calling everyone. Threats of lawsuits. Making it worse for herself." I typed back, acknowledged. Then at 11:30, my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. The first contact she'd initiated in months. "Can I come over?" I hesitated. This could be a trap, a way for Celeste to locate me. But Vanessa's message had something in it that felt genuine. Desperate. I replied with the address of the safe house and added, "Come alone." She arrived 20 minutes later, through the security camera in the lobby. I watched her get out of an Uber instead of her usual driver. She was dressed in jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. Nothing like the polished Ashford heir who'd floated through the engagement party in designer clothes. She stood on my doorstep, twisting her engagement ring around her finger, looking young and lost. "Come in," I said. She sat at my kitchen table staring at the wood grain, not meeting my eyes. The confidence and entitlement were gone. What remained looked like a frightened young woman who'd just discovered her entire world was built on lies. "I don't know what's happening," she said quietly. "Marcus is acting weird. Apex Flux's numbers aren't what he said they were. He's been pressuring me to sign documents I don't understand. He said it's normal, just prenuptial paperwork. But I looked closer and it basically gives him access to my trust fund if something happens to him. I asked for my own lawyer and he got angry. And Mom," she broke off, her voice cracking. I poured her tea and set it in front of her. "Chamomile, calming. What did he want you to sign specifically?" "A prenup, but not a normal one. And a confidentiality agreement about the company. It says I can't discuss Apex Flux's finances with anyone ever, under penalty of lawsuit. That I accept all liability for statements made about the company's performance during our marriage." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "That's not normal, is it?" "No," I said. "It's not normal. It means he knows Apex Flux is going to collapse, and he's trying to make sure you're holding the bag when it does." She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I've been so stupid." "You were manipulated," I corrected. "There's a difference. You've always been the only one who treated me like a real person," she whispered. "Everyone else just saw me as an extension of Mom's social ambitions or access to the family money. But you talked to me like I had a brain. Like I could do something besides look pretty at parties. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't point out that I'd tried to warn her months ago, and she'd dismissed me. People need to discover truth on their own timeline. Forcing it doesn't work." I slid Linda's business card across the table. "Call her today. Right now, if you can. She's a lawyer who specializes in exactly this kind of situation. She'll review those documents and tell you what you're actually signing. And she'll help you protect yourself." Vanessa picked up the card with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. For everything. For the party, for the badge, for not standing up for you when Mom—" "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." While she sipped her tea trying to compose herself, my phone buzzed again. James had sent a link to a Chicago Business Journal article. The headline read, "Whitmore Meltdown, Goes Viral, Sterling Capital, Co-Head Under Federal Investigation." Underneath was a grainy still photo of Derek mid-rage, laptop in pieces behind him, face contorted. The article detailed the SEC investigation. Anonymous sources confirming fraud allegations, limited partners demanding answers. Vanessa glanced at my screen. "Oh my God," she murmured. "That's Derek?" I locked the phone and set it aside. "Focus on you right now." "Call Linda." "Get your own legal representation. Don't sign anything Marcus gives you. And don't tell your mother where I am." She nodded slowly. "Mom is going insane. She's making phone calls, threatening lawsuits, claiming you fabricated everything." But Derek's lawyer told her to stop talking. "The SEC investigator wants to interview all of us." "Tell them the truth," I said. "That's all you can do." When she left an hour later, she hugged me awkwardly at the door. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, "for everything." After the door closed, I leaned against the counter, letting the quiet settle. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just focus. One phase completed, others still moving according to plan. In my temporary office, I opened the folder marked Grandview Hall Acquisition. James had emailed final purchase terms overnight. The shell company we'd established months ago had made an offer on the property. The owner, desperate and drowning in debt, had accepted immediately. All that remained was the wire transfer. The same venue where they'd tried to humiliate me would soon be mine, legally and completely. Down to the last chair, the last chandelier, the last piece of silverware they'd deliberately not set at my place. I signed the final authorization electronically, input the two-factor authentication, and clicked send. The confirmation screen appeared immediately. Transaction processing. Ownership transfer initiated. Then I checked my email again. 3 replies from the CEOs I'd contacted. Each one confirmed emergency board meetings, internal audits, and immediate suspension of all dealings with Sterling Capital pending legal review. 2 of them thanked me personally for exposing the fraud. One mentioned that his company was considering legal action against Derek for breach of fiduciary duty. At 2 in the afternoon, Linda called once more. "Media requests are flooding in," she said. "Every major financial publication wants an interview. I recommend no comment yet. Let the investigation play out first. You're protected as a whistleblower, But the less you say publicly right now, the better. Agreed, I said. Also, she added, the Grandview Hall sale is moving even faster than expected. The owner is so desperate he's waiving contingencies. We may close within 10 days instead of 2 weeks. Do it, I said. She laughed softly. You're efficient, Captain. I hung up and turned back to my corkboard. I'd brought it with me to the safe house, my army ribbons still pinned to it. The housekeeper badge sat beside them now, a stark contrast. One earned through service, the other assigned through contempt. Underneath, I'd written in small block letters, Mission objectives complete Phase 1. The sun dipped lower, casting afternoon light across my temporary desk. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 new lines. Sterling Capital meltdown public apex flux under investigation. Grandview Hall acquisition in progress. Then I underlined them once and closed the book. My phone buzzed one last time that afternoon. James again, security footage hit mainstream news. 50,000 views and climbing. Investors panicking. Sterling Capital stock down 34%. You were right about the timeline. I typed back copy. Outside my window, traffic hummed along the street. Inside, every phase of Operation Vanguard was running exactly as planned. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just systematically, like a well-executed military operation, where each piece triggers the next, where contingencies were planned months ago, where victory isn't about feeling good, but about accomplishing objectives. The late morning sun cut across my temporary office as alerts continued lighting up my phone. 3 days had passed since the engagement party. 3 days since I'd walked out of the Grandview Hall wearing a housekeeper badge. 3 days since I'd executed Operation Vanguard. Linda's name appeared first on my screen, Bradley suspended. Indefinite leave. Equity stake frozen. Security escort out of building. She attached a photo forwarded by a contact still working at Sterling Capital. Derek, cardboard box in his hands, 2 security guards flanking him, walking out of the glass tower where he'd once bragged about real business. His face was ashen, his tie loosened, his eyes hollow. Behind him, through the glass walls, his assistant stared at the floor rather than watch his public humiliation. Before I could reply, another message came through. Celeste served second subpoena. Offshore assets frozen. Attorney bills mounting. Can't access liquid funds. Attached was a screenshot of court documents filed that morning, detailing the extent of Celeste's offshore accounts and the preliminary injunction freezing all transfers pending investigation. Then Vanessa called. Her voice was steadier than before, clearer, more certain. I ended the engagement, she said without greeting. I confronted Marcus with the evidence Linda helped me review. Financial statements, user data, partnership claims that don't exist. He denied everything at first, got angry, tried to gaslight me. Then I showed him the bank statements Linda uncovered. He broke down, started begging, crying, saying he could fix it, that I just needed to give him time, that if I stayed with him we could weather this together. What did you say? I asked. I told him I'm not interested in being his lifeline when Apex Flux crashes, that I'm not interested in being an accessory to fraud, that I'm not interested in him, period. Her voice was strong, no trace of the uncertain girl who'd shown up at my door 3 days ago. Good for you, I said. I told Mom too, she added quietly. She's furious. Not at Marcus. At me. Of course she is. She called me ungrateful. Said you've poisoned me against the family. That I'm throwing away my future for some feminist fantasy. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what she thought. That's real progress, I said. I wanted to tell you first, she continued. Thank you for helping me see clearly. For treating me like I had a brain instead of just a trust fund. For, her voice cracked, for being the only person who cared more about me than my money. You helped yourself, I said gently. I just handed you a flashlight. You're the one who chose to turn it on and look around. We hung up. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of the past week settle. Not like exhaustion, but like a heavy pack you'd carried to the extraction point. The mission complete, the objectives achieved, the burden finally released. James walked in a few minutes later carrying a thick file folder. He'd been staying in a nearby hotel, coordinating the digital side of Operation Vanguard, making sure all our systems stayed secure. Grandview Hall purchase complete, he said simply, setting the folder on my desk. Signed, sealed, wired. Official transfer of ownership completed this morning. It's yours now. Every chair, every chandelier, every piece of property down to the napkins in the storage closet. I opened the folder, scanning the documents. Mortgage assignment, deed transfer, vendor contracts, insurance policies, tax records. The very place they'd tried to humiliate me now sat under Vanguard Solutions ownership, transferred through the shell company in a transaction so clean that not even the best forensic accountant could trace it back to me for months. James grinned. We even got the kitchen equipment at a discount. Owner was so desperate he threw it in for free. I laughed, a short, genuine sound. Of course you did. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. There's one complication. Celeste's charity gala is still booked for December. Contract signed months ago. Deposit paid. Invitations already sent to half of Chicago's elite. We'll honor the contract, I said immediately. James raised an eyebrow. She's going to hate that. She'll adapt, I said. Or she won't. Either way, the event runs according to our policies, not hers. He nodded and left me to the paperwork. Across the city, the fallout continued to spread like ripples from a stone dropped in water. By noon, financial blogs were posting side-by-side photos Derek's meltdown on one side, my SEC filing exhibits on the other, drawing clear lines between the evidence and the consequences. Former employees of Sterling Capital, emboldened by the investigation, began sharing their own stories. Temper tantrums in meetings, misallocated funds, expenses charged to client accounts, pattern after pattern of behavior that had been quietly tolerated as long as Derek was making the partners' money. Apex Flux's investors announced an independent audit, hiring a prestigious firm to review all financial statements from the past 3 years. The company's stock, which had been trading high on promises and press releases, dropped 40% in a single day. Celeste's social club, an exclusive organization she'd chaired for the past decade, suspended her membership pending resolution of legal matters. The language was diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. She was toxic now, someone to distance from rather than associate with. Linda called again in the afternoon. We've initiated clawback motions on Celeste's divorce fraud, she said. Turns out she hid significant assets during her divorce proceedings years ago. Her ex-husband's attorney is salivating. She may lose the Gold Coast house within weeks. Make sure she gets served at work, I said. Linda paused. Work? She'll have to get a job soon, I said flatly. She's burned through her liquid assets and all her accounts are frozen. Reality is coming fast. That evening, I drove out to the Grandview Hall for the first time as its owner. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a catering truck making a delivery. Inside, staff were setting up for a corporate dinner scheduled for that night. They nodded politely as I passed, not recognizing me as anything other than another client or vendor. The main ballroom looked different in daylight, stripped of the party decorations and champagne glasses. Sunlight poured through tall windows, revealing details hidden by the dim evening lighting of the engagement party. Scuffed baseboards, worn carpet in high-traffic areas, water stains on the ceiling that expensive centerpieces had been positioned to hide. I ran my hand over one of the round tables, feeling the polished wood under my palm, the same shaped table where I'd stood without a chair, where Derek had laughed and said food was for family. Now it belonged to me. In a small office off the kitchen, I found folders left by the previous manager. Policies, seating protocols, service guidelines, guest distinction procedures. One page printed and laminated, spelled out VIP versus staff rules in stock terms. VIP guests reserved seating, premium service, complimentary drinks, personal attention from management. Staff and vendors designated holding area, basic service, standard rates, maintain distance from VIP areas. That would be the first thing to burn. Back at the front desk, I found the assistant manager, a woman in her 50s who'd been working at the hall for 20 years. Effective immediately, I said. We're changing all name badge procedures. Just first and last names. No titles, no designations, no special labels. She blinked, processing. Okay, that's actually easier. And seating, I continued. No more VIP sections, no missing chairs. No hierarchical placement designed to humiliate anyone. Everyone who buys a ticket gets a seat. Everyone sits. She nodded again, more emphatically this time. Understood. To be honest, those policies always made me uncomfortable. But the previous owner insisted. I walked the length of the hall, checking each corner, making mental notes of repairs needed. Carpet in the north corridor. Paint touch-ups in the bathrooms. Updated lighting in the ballroom. New sound system for events. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, if it ever had been. This was about building something better, creating a place where dignity wasn't negotiable, where respect wasn't determined by the size of your bank account or the status of your family name. On my way out, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He's been calling me non-stop, begging for help. I'm testifying to the SEC tomorrow. I kept records of everything. I'm sorry, or even Rebecca, Derek's mistress, was jumping ship, providing evidence against him to save herself. In a way, I appreciated her practicality. Driving back into the city, I passed a bus stop where a woman in a nurse's uniform sat with a packed lunch waiting for the next bus. Normal life continuing. No headlines, no scandals, no federal investigations. Just people trying to get to work, to pay their bills, to live their lives. It reminded me why I'd built Vanguard Solutions in the first place, to keep small businesses and working people afloat when the powerful tried to crush them. To create systems that valued competence over connections, merit over money, dignity over status. Back at the safe house, the living room felt larger than it should. As if Derek's absence, the Ashford family's absence, had created space I hadn't known was missing. I'd spent 5 years in rooms that felt too small, too crowded with expectations and judgments and quiet cruelty. Now, alone in a temporary apartment with second-hand furniture and bare walls, I felt like I could finally breathe. I poured a glass of water and sat at the dining table, flipping through the Grandview Hall's vendor list. Local bakeries, florists, event staff companies. I circled names of veteran-owned businesses, making notes about which ones to contact first, which ones to offer priority contracts. My laptop chimed with an email from Linda, court-approved emergency freeze on Celeste's remaining trust accounts. She's officially broke. No liquid assets, properties mortgaged beyond their value. She's going to have to declare bankruptcy or find employment. I typed back noted. Then another email from James, investor calls spiking. Derek is persona non grata. Sterling Capital considering full restructuring. Partner meeting scheduled to discuss removing his name from the firm entirely. I closed the laptop and leaned back. This was what execution looked like. Not fireworks, not drama. Just systems moving as designed. Consequences unfolding according to plan. Dominoes falling in sequence. The next morning, Vanessa texted, I told Mom I'm enrolling in an MBA program. She said I'm betraying the family. I don't care. I'm doing it. I replied, good. Proud of you. Later that day, James stopped by with updated financial projections. We can convert the Grandview Hall into a profitable community space within 6 months, he said, spreading spreadsheets across my table. Events, conferences, citizenship ceremonies, weddings. And with the veteran support grants we'll qualify for, it's basically self-sustaining. Maybe even profitable by year 2. Do it, I said. He looked at me for a moment, studying my face. You're not even smiling. I will, I said, when it's running, when families are using the space. When veterans have a place to celebrate milestones without being labelled or judged. That's when I'll smile. That night, alone in my temporary office, I pulled the housekeeper badge from my purse and pinned it next to my army ribbons on the corkboard I'd brought from home. The two artifacts side by side told a complete story: service and contempt, honour and cruelty, respect earned and dignity stolen. Then I wrote a single line underneath on an index card. Objective. Transform humiliation into justice. The room was quiet. The city outside glowed under streetlights. No dramatics, just another evening of logistics, planning, executing. The way military operations always worked when done correctly. The weeks that followed blurred together in a sequence of meetings. Contract signings, renovations, and carefully orchestrated media appearances. By the time the first frost hit Chicago in late November, the Grandview Hall no longer looked like the same venue where I'd been humiliated. The scaffolding was gone. The hedges trimmed and healthy. The marble floors polished to a shine that matched the new brass nameplates installed on the front doors. Inside, the VIP versus staff policies had been shredded and recycled. The first thing guests saw now was a simple welcome sign in elegant letters. Every guest is a guest. I walked the halls with James one cold morning, clipboard in hand, checking off repairs and upgrades from our long list. Security cameras repositioned? I asked. All angles covered, he replied. No blind spots, no hidden zones. Everyone visible, everyone safe. Staff uniforms? Standardized. No differentials. Everyone gets the same quality gear, same level of respect. We passed the ballroom where construction crews were installing new lighting. The smell of fresh paint mixing with coffee from a brake cart set up in the corner. Workers chatted easily, No one glancing nervously over their shoulders for a boss's disapproval. No one worried about hierarchies or status games. This is already different, James said quietly. That's the point, I said. Later that morning, I met with Vanessa in my office upstairs. A small room I'd converted from what used to be VIP private lounge. She looked completely different from the society girl who'd floated through her engagement party in designer clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple blazer over jeans, no expensive jewelry, no elaborate makeup. Just a young woman focused on work instead of appearances. She'd enrolled in an accelerated MBA program and had started interning at Vanguard Solutions 3 days a week, learning the actual business of business instead of just the social performance of it. She handed me a folder. Draft proposal for a Veterans Women's Grant Program, she said. I think we can partner with the state on matching funds. The numbers work if we structure it right. I flipped through the pages. Her analysis was sharp, her recommendations practical and well-researched. This wasn't busy work or a vanity project. This was real. This is good, I said. She smiled faintly. Feels good to do something real for once. It shows, I said. She sat down across from me, her expression growing more serious. I keep thinking about that night. The badge. The missing chair. The way everyone just watched and did nothing. I was so wrapped up in Mom's world, in trying to live up to her expectations, that I didn't even see what was happening to you. I didn't see a lot of things. You're here now, I said simply. That's what matters. She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I want to help you make this place a symbol of second chances. A place where people come to build instead of to tear down. Then start with the December Gala, I said. Your mother's charity event. It's still on the books. Her eyebrows rose. Mom's gala? You're still letting her use the space? Yes, I said. We'll honor the contract, but it runs under our policies now. Vanessa laughed once, surprised. She's going to hate that. She'll adapt, I said. Or she won't. Either way, the event runs our way. Equal treatment. No status games. The charity still gets every dollar raised. Only the cruelty disappears. We spent the next hour planning. Seating charts with no head table. Just round tables where donors and volunteers would mix. Name badges stripped down to first and last names, nothing else. Staff meals served at the same tables as guests during breaks. The charity itself, a literacy fund for at-risk youth, would still receive every dollar raised. Only the hierarchy games would disappear. That afternoon, James brought in a photographer to take promotional shots of the renovated hall. We're pushing a new campaign, he explained. Community celebration initiative. Weddings, graduations, citizenship ceremonies. Space for everyone, not just old money. I stood for one of the photos in front of the marble staircase where I'd walked in wearing a housekeeper badge just weeks earlier. Not posing dramatically, just standing the way I always did. Feet planted, shoulders back, eyes level. The posture of someone who'd earned their place. The photographer clicked once, twice, then nodded. Got it. After they left, I walked back into the ballroom alone. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching the new brass fixtures and throwing warm light across the polished floor. It didn't feel like a place of humiliation anymore. It felt like a forward operating base being stood up after an attack, clean, orderly, purposeful, ready for use. In the evening, Vanessa returned with a box of documents she'd printed from online news archives. You might want to see this, she said carefully. Inside were photos taken by a local reporter. Celeste working at a medical clinic reception desk in Naperville, 20 miles outside the city. She wore scrubs and a name tag that said simply Celeste with no title, no status marker. The accompanying article described how she'd lost her Gold Coast mansion to court-ordered penalties and was now living in a one-bedroom apartment near the train station, working 40 hours a week answering phones and filing insurance paperwork. I set the photos aside without much reaction. So she's finally earning an honest wage, I said. Vanessa bit her lip. I don't know whether to feel bad or relieved. Both can be true, I said. But we're not in charge of her choices. She made her decisions. These are the consequences. She still blames you, Vanessa said quietly. She calls me every few days, crying or yelling or both. Says you destroyed the family out of spite, that you manipulated everyone, that you're a vengeful, bitter woman who couldn't handle being shown your place. She can blame whoever she wants, I said. The facts don't change. We went back to reviewing grant proposals, working through budgets and timelines. No gloating, no celebration of Celeste's downfall. Just work. By the time the December gala arrived, The Grandview Hall was unrecognizable to anyone who'd attended Vanessa's engagement party. The physical space was the same, but everything about how it functioned had changed. Guests walked in expecting velvet ropes and reserved seating. Instead, they found round tables with simple name cards. No titles or designations. Staff greeted everyone the same way, with the same level of courtesy and attention. The catering team, half of which was now comprised of veteran-owned businesses, served meals without distinction between major donors and volunteers. I stayed mostly in the background, letting Vanessa handle logistics. She moved through the space with confidence I'd never seen in her before, giving clear instructions to staff, adjusting details on the fly, solving problems with calm competence instead of panic or demands. When Celeste arrived in a borrowed gown, clearly expensive but obviously not hers, she stopped short in the lobby. No VIP lounge. No champagne reception for major donors. No head table. Just a sea of equals, all welcome the same way. Vanessa walked up to her calmly, professionally. "Welcome to the Grandview Hall," she said. "I'll show you to your table." Celeste's eyes flicked around wildly, taking in the changes, searching for the hierarchies she'd always relied on. "This isn't how we do things," she hissed. "It's how we do them now," Vanessa said simply, and guided her inside. I watched from the edge of the room as the evening unfolded. The charity still raised record donations, more than it ever had under Celeste's old system of favor trading and status seeking. The crowd adapted quickly, many guests even commenting on how refreshing it was to actually talk to people they wouldn't normally meet, to sit with volunteers instead of only with other wealthy donors. Staff sat and ate with guests during their breaks. The sense of entitlement that had always hung over these events drained away like stale air, finally escaping a sealed room. When it was over, Celeste left without speaking to me, without even looking in my direction. But Vanessa stayed behind to help the cleanup crew stack chairs, her borrowed designer gown replaced with jeans and a work shirt. She looked tired but deeply satisfied. "This is what you meant by second chances," she said softly, looking over the empty ballroom. "Yes," I said. We stood together in the quiet for a moment, the space that had witnessed my humiliation now filled with the echoes of something better. Later that night, back in my office at the hall, I opened my corkboard where the housekeeper badge still hung next to my army ribbons. Beneath it, I pinned a new card printed with the Grandview Hall's official mission statement. Respect for all guests, opportunities for all staff, second chances for everyone. I sat down at my desk and wrote quick emails. To James, good work today. Move forward on the citizenship ceremony schedule. To Vanessa, proud of you. The grant is approved. Outside, snow had started to fall, dusting the city in white. Inside, the work continued. Contracts to sign, vendors to vet, programs to plan. Not glamorous, not dramatic. Just steady, disciplined action, turning a place of public humiliation into a platform for public dignity. And somewhere in the city, in a one-bedroom apartment near the train station, Celeste was learning what it meant to work for a living. Derek was preparing for his criminal trial. Marcus was watching his company collapse. The systems that had protected them for so long had finally stopped working, and they were discovering what accountability actually felt like. I didn't smile about their suffering. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I just kept building, kept working. Kept proving that discipline and integrity beat arrogance every single time. The badge on my corkboard wasn't a wound anymore. It was a reminder. And every person who walked through the Grandview Hall's doors would see it, would understand its meaning, would know that this was a place where labels didn't define you. That was real justice. That was real leadership.